trying to just lean people away a little bit from drugs, surgeries, short-term, anti-inflammatories. I still think that's a huge benefit that we provide. No matter if I agree with certain chiropractors and the way they explain things or do it in their practice, there's still, like, the big picture perspective is still pulling patients in more that direction, which I think is very, very useful.
Are you thinking about doing more recording?
Just like educational stuff and just all the stuff I kind of think about on a daily basis, the writing that I do, just putting it out online just so other people can learn from it. So
I had a mentor for a brief period. Did you ever meet or hear of Dan Bachman, Dr. Bachman?
that sounds very familiar. Yeah.
He passed away from cancer less than a year ago. It was kind of a weird story. It was during COVID. He did some webinar through the American Chiropractic Association on telehealth, chiropractic via telehealth. And I hopped
nice.
on that, and I remember it being really good because he switched. At that point, he switched from insurance to cash based, and he was practicing in Austin, so he had to go completely virtual, and it ended up working out quite well for him. So I started following him on social media. I thought he was a really interesting guy, more sports oriented, a lot of rehab. And he posted something at some point about that he'd been diagnosed with some pretty advanced stage cancer. And he basically created this white paper on his thoughts on the profession. And he said, if anyone wants to read it and give me feedback, let me know. So I just DM'd him and I said, send me a copy. I read it. We hopped on the phone. I gave him my thoughts on it. And, he, at that point, I think he still lived a couple more years, maybe a year and a half. So I'd asked him, I know you don't have a lot of time left, but would you be willing to give me some mentorship? And one of the things that he told me was get on YouTube, because that it's a search engine. So he said, his stuff was going to live on beyond him on YouTube. And it was things that a lot of it started off as just conversations that he had with patients routinely. And so there were the ideas that he was trying to get across. And so he said, it's awesome because I've just recorded some of that stuff. And then I have these conversations in person, but I know that people don't remember everything I say. So I can follow up with a YouTube link and they can hear me talk about it whenever they want. And at that point, I didn't have a YouTube presence at all. And it was some of the best advice I ever got. Not that my YouTube channel does well, but it is so much easier to have a conversation and then acknowledge while you're having the conversation with someone, I realize you're not going to remember this, so don't freak out. I have a video of me talking about this concept. I'm going to send you the YouTube link. Just watch it, and then you'll pick up the highlights. And it's helped a ton because when people come back, maybe it's been a week between visits, I very rarely get that response of, oh, I didn't remember, or, I didn't understand, because I do follow up with those videos. And for the most part, people watch them, or at least they have the opportunity to. And it's been really, really valuable. So I'm thankful that I got that little bit of time with him and that he gave me a little bit of the precious time that I had left. And some of that wisdom was just, I think, from years of experience and then getting out there and helping people and having success with it. It was such simple advice, but it was something I probably wouldn't have done because I don't like hearing my voice or seeing myself on camera. So it was just kind of one of those things that I said, all right, well, if this is what you think is important, I'm going to start doing it. And it's been very useful. But
it's so, it's so funny because I was thinking back, kind of when we were talking a little bit, and then, you're saying, talk about kind of your, I guess, journey, process going through school and stuff. So I started kind of reminiscing on, and I feel like I've gotten so much utility and knowledge from just these different people that I've followed on social media, YouTube, you know, mostly PhDs and doctors that have become these big educational, YouTubers and stuff. But I've gotten in many ways like more value than I did from my very expensive education in college and in Cairo school. In so many different, like in nutrition, psychology, like just so many different fields. I feel like if there's kind of there's kind of fine print there. Like you have to have some level of knowledge base. You can get caught up following people that are, not giving the best advice online, which a lot of, you probably deal with your patients is, they heard something online from some influencer that you have to kind of correct. But honestly, if you know how to follow the right people and certain especially just evidence-based, YouTubers and the amount of knowledge out there is just crazy. Like you can really learn so much. And I started doing that back in like college, like early college really started. I think that's when YouTube kind of took off. I was following like guys like Lane Norton back then in nutrition. Because that was more my interest, in college, just fitness and nutrition people. And then even just through Cairo school, just following all these different doctors that I thought were doing cool stuff. And most of that stuff I use on a daily basis came from, online content creators. So I think it's super valuable, and it has kind of a double-edged sword aspect because people can get caught up in, kind of the influencers and different content creators that it's not always the best, most accurate information out there. But yeah, I've gotten such use out of it, so it's nice.
Yeah. There's too much information. It's hard to filter. I think that's the problem that most people
Yeah.
have is whoever has the best production value. I've tried to tell some of my patients and my students, if they're not wearing a shirt, it's probably, it's probably not super credible. Although I'm sure there is some content out there provided by shirtless people that's quite good.
Yeah.
But I think that there's some trends that you can, and when you're watching a video,
Oh yeah.
I don't know, but yeah, even if you have a background, it's easy to in the field, it's easy to get sucked in. And I find that I don't know if there's anyone that I found that's completely good or completely bad.
Yeah.
Even the people I don't like, that I think on the balance produce a lot of garbage, they still produce some stuff. And I honestly think that if I got in the room with a lot of them, we would probably agree on more things than we disagree. It's just they take maybe a smaller sliver and then they amplify that on social media and they kind of blow it out of proportion and make it sound like it's a bigger deal than what it is. So I feel like most people are fairly level-headed and they understand the nuance, but what they portray on social media is it's amplifying something that they're trying to either market or something that they have a bias towards. And I think that's kind of the hard part because a lot of people, I think maybe you get this too, where patients are like, oh, you don't like this person or you like this person. And it's like, well, it's not a question of like or don't like. It's just, I think that they're misleading, but probably with good intent too. So it's hard to tell. I don't know. I think there are some extremes.
Well,
like if you want to, like the Liver King is an extreme where I'm not so sure that the intent has been great. Yeah. So I think
that was the first name that popped into my head. Yeah.
But not everyone's as obvious as, if someone's shirtless and roided out and running around New York City barefoot yelling at people in fast food restaurants, it's probably not super credible. And I think that maybe should be obvious to a lot of people, but I think a lot of it's really insidious, and it's hard to figure out what's good content and what's bad content. But
Yeah,
I don't know. That is
I
the
think
scary
it's
part, though,
always
because I wonder how much bad content I actually put out, because I have to acknowledge that I have a bias towards a lot of
yeah.
different things, and then my mind changes from time to time. So I don't know.
I know. I'm pretty sure you're pretty far away from that. But yeah, it's hard to it's always hard to, I guess someone's intentions. You know, it's impossible. But I always see like there's like these two different brains. It's like the marketing. You know, there's like the marketing brain, and then
Mm-hmm.
there's the actual person and the science. You know, if they're a science-based person, or that's a tough navigation for a lot of people, especially the evidence-based science, you know, fitness people or nutrition or chiros. Like they're trying to be like good at marketing and get their content out there, but they're also trying to stay nuanced and, you know, evidence-based and not be too you know, bold or certain with their claims. So I think that's a tough, you know, dance to do for a lot of people. But I you know, if you just stay true to like what you believe and what works, then you know, there's a lot of garbage on there, so there's no harm in putting out, you know, whatever you think is good and truthful. It's going to be a lot better than what most people put out. So,
Well, when I had thought about having you on, actually, I wanted you to talk about what you believe. I'm curious because what the listeners won't know is that, we knew each other in grad school, although you were
mhm.
2 or 3 cohorts ahead of me. So you graduated a year or two ahead of me. Um, but we connected over social media when you were at a crossroads, which I found very interesting because I have been at a similar crossroad at one point. And I'm I kind of want you to tell that story of how what led up to you having to make a decision, and then ultimately what decision did you make?
Mhm. I mean, oh, there's so many crossroads. Um, you know, before Cairo school, there were crossroads. There was tough, you know, tough decisions between PT school, MD, you know, going medical school, going Cairo school. Um, you know, it's hard to look. You can look back on it now with the current knowledge that I have now, and you can say, oh, that was a not a good decision. But back then, it was based on my experience with Cairo and other, you know, PT too, just having a lot of injuries as an athlete. Um, and honestly, it was chiropractors that always helped me more than anyone else. Like they spent the most. I guess I was fortunate to go to, you know, good chiropractors, and they spent the most time. You know, they gave me some other options, so I always was more attracted to that while I was going through college, and then just my other interests at the time too. Just the you know, I was really into nutrition at the time and like functional medicine, which has become like a kind of a hijacked term, but um, you know, that mindset and those were some of the things I was into. So Cairo was more of a path that you could pursue a lot of that other stuff. You know, it was PT was very kind of narrow in your scope. And Cairo had more, you know, license, you know, the more scope of practice and the licensing gave you a lot more freedom to do some of those other things I was interested at the time. So that was the main factor, I guess, that contributed to that early decision. And then I kind of went into school like kind of aware of the division in the field, you know. So I think that was a little different from your experience, where um, yeah, I remember even in the first term going through some of the Cairo philosophy courses, and we had those discussions about, you know, the belief systems behind chiropractic, and I mean, I was already, I think, just my personality, but I think from like undergrad, just being a very scientific thinking type of person. Um, and I'm looking back now, I'm actually lucky that I chose the school that I chose, because I think if I went to some of the other schools, I probably wouldn't have finished, or would have been a little more thrown off by the more philosophical belief systems and some of the other stuff out there. But I was pretty aware of it, like going in, just talking to chiropractors. And um, but yeah, even in school, I mean, it was kind of that, fourth, fifth term period. I had another crossroads, I guess. Should I stay here? Should I go, you know, go on to something else, go met more of like the medical route? Just starting to question more if it was aligning with my, belief system, and how I wanted to practice in the future. But I think finding like the sports medicine program at the school, and just like-minded chiropractors that were more into what I was interested in, that was really helpful. Um, but yeah, that tension was kind of there going in. And then I think coming out of school, I think it's pretty universal of an experience for new doctors, and probably in almost every industry, there's a little bit of like an existential crisis in a way, like like all your ideals that you had about the profession, about what it might look like, about business, what the business might look like. A lot of those things kind of get collapsed, or just broken in a way, just by, the real world. Like you see what it's actually like working day to day. Um, and if you're in the wrong environment and not a good, first couple of jobs, then that can make it a little more challenging. So the first few years going through with COVID pandemic, and just um, you know a lot of difficulty with my first company that I was with. Um, and yeah, it just left me after like a year or two, just another crossroads where do I want to keep doing this? Am I going to stay in this profession, or should I start looking at doing some other things that you know, kind of attracted my interest? I can say like the one cool thing with having the chiropractic license is you can, I guess if I'm talking to like some younger new grads right now, um, there's so many different things you can do with the license. Like I think you get so narrow minded coming out of school. You think I can only do this one job or this type of work, but um, the license is still really powerful. Like you can do so many different things. You can work at the schools. You can teach. You can do more of like a health coaching type of business. So those were all routes that I was looking into and exploring at the time. But yeah, it was a few years of just kind of struggling with the day to day job aspect of it. And I don't think it was all, frustration with the actual job, but more so with just the other stuff that was happening around like COVID, and just a lot of the difficulties with, my first couple of positions just brought a lot more stress into it. So I think that also influenced, um, how I was feeling about, the profession and the career at the time. Um, but yeah, it took 2 to 3 years of just kind of working through all those things, and then looking for more opportunities, and coming across some stuff that I was more excited about, more up my style with, sports medicine and rehab type of care. So, um, I can say the good experience that came out of it was I got to see kind of the in and outs of so many different types of chiropractic businesses and clinics. So I've seen them all. Like I worked as a covering doctor for a while. So I've seen the 70, 80 people a day, you know, the factories. I've seen the subluxation based practices. I've seen rehab based and multidisciplinary. And I've seen chiros that were just doing more like health coaching and different stuff like that. So really the last 4 to 5 years have been a great experience in that way. I've seen so many different ways to practice and to operate a business, and learned a lot of things. So um, I guess now it's just kind of finding my little niche in a way of what I'm good at, and aligning that with how I believe, um, you know, what I believe about chiropractic and how I think it should progress in the future. Um, and kind of making that work now in my current position. So,
How do you want it to progress? If you could
well,
influence,
it'd be nice if we could get,
if we gave you control right now of the profession,
uh,
what direction would you want to
yeah.
take it?
Oh, magic is it's like the magic wand question.
Yeah, sure.
Magic wand question. I don't know. Did you take? Well, I guess we all took. I think it was like it might have been first semester. We had was it Dr. Morgenthau, Chiro theories, or one of those courses? You remember that?
I remember doing one theory course. I don't remember who taught it. I don't.
Mm-hmm.
What I remember from Dr. Morgenthau was like the evidence behind chiropractic. There was a class on that later on,
Mm-hmm.
going through research that supported the profession. And
Mm-hmm.
then that's really all I remember from her teaching as the lead
Yeah.
professor. I don't know if that's what you're talking about.
Yeah, we had I think it was first term. They kind of introduced us. I remember we did have her again later, like in our clinical
Mm-hmm.
year. And that was the class where we were just reading like research, I think. And then you had
Yeah,
to like
that's what I'm talking
talk
about. Yeah.
about it and write. Yeah. So the first course was I think it was first term, which was kind of surprising that they kind of thrust that on us like first term. I don't know how other schools do it, but it'd be interesting to see the difference between the schools. And um, but I was looking at some old papers I wrote, and it was kind of that same like magic wand question, like if you could kind of see the direction that we're going. And at the time, I actually wrote that it'd be nice if we saw, me personally, if I was the magic wand question, I would basically just merge PT and chiropractic into the same universities, and also probably connect them more with the medical schools. So there's a lot more money and just finance backing. But it would be kind of just turn it into something more of like a doctor of physical medicine or something, musculoskeletal medicine, whatever you want to call it. Um, and you kind of have that in other countries. They have physios. There's physios that kind of do everything chiros do. They learn how to manipulate and do a lot of manual therapy, but they just have one category of physio. They don't really call them anything else. So that would be a magic wand question, but obviously that's the logistics of that kind of stuff is complicated. And then I do remember from that class I think we read a debate between, is it Murphy? Donald Murphy? And who's the the primary spine care guy? I think it's Murphy.
I don't know his name now, but I know what you're talking
Yeah, so
about. Primary
Murphy
spine. Yeah. The ones from Pitt.
yeah.
Yeah.
So the Pit, yeah. So Murphy was he might also be the CRISP, clinical reasoning and spine pain guy.
Okay.
Yeah, Murphy. So a lot of really good research and papers from him that I've read. But his argument was more that primary spine care direction, which I think that makes a lot of sense. His argument was that's kind of what we're already known for, in the culture, across other professions too. We're kind of the spine people. Um, and I think he was arguing like we should use that to our advantage for, the momentum instead of trying to pivot into like something completely different. But obviously as a sports medicine, like as a sports and fitness and strength and conditioning person like you, I love treating extremity issues and doing rehab and stuff. So, um, that me personally, I didn't like that as much, but I totally understand. And that is mostly what we do every day. Most of the people I see every day is spine conditions. So, um, I think that was one route. And then I think just embracing like our conservative musculoskeletal, more general kind of identity. I think that's kind of the nuts and bolts of what we do. Obviously there needs to be like so many educational reforms. And that's, again, all that stuff's really hard to figure out and to put into practice. But I think some of the folks especially from the sports medicine diplomate and some of our mentors and teachers from our school are kind of involved in those kinds of things, trying to steer the profession in those directions. But I mean, yeah, I guess if I would sum it up, just getting away from our backtracking identity, just being that as our soul, what we're known for, being more just a conservative, drug and surgery free musculoskeletal provider. And yeah, that just, again, it has to stem from the educational institutions. Like it can't come from top down. It has to come from bottom up. Like when kids are first learning in the schools have to get more on the same page with a common goal in mind. And yeah, just kind of, shed away some of the things from the past that our professions had a hard time doing, I think. And things that have, whether you believe in them or not, whether they're true or not, they're keeping us from progressing in a way. So they're keeping us from being, more respected by other professions, and they're really just hurting. They're just hurting the profession in the long run. So I think it's why you've seen PT take off so much and start to take, take up more of the market, is that they are now the go-to for any MD or any ortho. First thing is, okay, PT, even if it's spine. So it used to be like, oh, well, it's spine pain, go see a chiropractor. But now it's just PT. So they just completely, um, separated those two on the global. Yeah, I still, obviously I have MDs that send people to me, and I know I've spoken with a lot of MDs that still really think chiropractic is very beneficial, but on an average overall, we're not getting sent patients anymore. So that's not going to help us in the long run.
I think it's interesting because just the language. So if someone's like, sometimes someone will say to me, "Oh, so you do more PT?" But I
Yeah.
do a lot of rehab. But it's almost as if physical therapy owns rehab. They own therapeutic exercise, and then people will say, "Oh, so you do more PT than chiropractic," and by chiropractic they mean
hmm
joint manipulation. And I think to your
hmm
point, PTs can do all of the joint manipulation that we can do, and we
hmm
can do all of the rehab, or it's within our scope of practice to do what they do, other than maybe some of the specialized stuff, because I know there are physical therapists that maybe specialize in respiratory therapy and things like that. So I guess I'm more specifically talking about musculoskeletal, because physical therapy as a profession can be a bit more broad. But I think there's And those labels, I think, are within the chiropractic profession too, because I'll have chiropractors say stuff like that. Oh, you don't really do chiropractic then.
Mm-hmm.
And I say, no, I mean,
Yeah.
everything I do is within our scope of practice. So, and I am a chiropractor, but I don't know that you can do chiropractic, and I don't know that you can do PT. You know,
Yeah.
you can work on rehab, you can do therapeutic exercise, you can do strength and conditioning, you can manipulate joints, you can mobilize joints, you can do soft tissue therapy.
Mm-hmm.
You can do all of these different types of therapy, but
Mm-hmm.
no profession really owns them. Medical doctors could practice that way if they wanted to as well, and some do. DOs maybe a little bit more than MDs, but I think that's an interesting thing, just with the way that the average person sees us, and maybe the way that
Yeah.
MDs see us versus PT.
Yeah.
I almost the name, I feel the names, the labels, I think almost hold us back, and they probably hold physical therapy back too, because there's this preconceived notion of what you're going to get. Well, there's a lot of physical
Mm-hmm.
therapists out there, I think, exceed the expectations of what you're going to get out of going to a physical
Mm-hmm.
therapist. And so, to your point previously, it would be neat to be able to merge the two and have a new title, you know,
Yeah.
where you don't have those preconceived historical associations. It could just be, well,
Yeah.
this is an evidence-based provider who's going to use the best
Mm-hmm.
available evidence in conjunction with their experience to make sure that I get the best care possible, because otherwise patients have to choose. I feel like they have to
Mm-hmm.
pick are you going to go to a chiropractor or are you going to go to PT, because it's going to, and which one are you going to pick? Because it might dictate your results, unfortunately. And that's
Yeah.
almost unfair for a patient to have to make that choice with limited information. And then
Mm-hmm.
that's going to be the result, because I know a lot of chiropractors, they only have one trick. They can only do one thing. Maybe they can adjust in a couple different ways,
Mm-hmm.
but they have to do that one thing to everybody. So if you go there, that's the only thing they can recommend. And very rarely are they going to turn people away, because it's probably not going to hurt them and it might benefit them. But that's kind of a rough thing, you think, as a consumer, to go to a healthcare provider and to acknowledge walking in that you already know the recommendation before they even examine you.
Yeah.
So what's the point of even going through the process? And I have worked in environments like that where chiropractors don't ask a lot of questions and they don't put a lot of detail into it. And the thought process is, well, what's the point? I know what I'm going to do anyway. We're just going to do,
Yeah.
so let's just skip to that, which makes
Mm-hmm.
me sad. I think it's probably one of the things that
It
bothers me the
does.
most.
Yeah. I think I get more annoyed with the, again, like, yeah, the label. Again, like, I think it's just human nature. Like, people just have to have these broad generalizations and labels for like stuff they just don't know a lot about. Um, but it's more personally annoying when, like, I had a patient the other day who just had a discectomy, and she came back after, I think, like 2 weeks, and she's like, my neurologist told me, don't don't let the chiropractor crack your back. And that just, I was like, God. I'm like, first, that shows me that MD just knows very little about how much I know, and like how much, like, what I know about how to, obviously common sense of like what to do around a surgical injury, or just, but in that MD's head, that's all, I guess that's all we do to that individual. Um, let alone, like, they don't realize that we have enough knowledge to obviously be aware of like how to work around a surgical injury and to do other stuff other than just um cracking. So that's usually what bothers me more, when it comes from that perspective. It makes more sense, the general public, especially when it's like all you see online is just back cracking, and I'm really happy to see more chiros put out, more of the rehab videos and different content. but again, it's really hard to like let people know exactly what you do and show them, how complex and how, um, you know, just how many different things are involved in chiropractic treatment. But those are the videos that get the views, so that's how it works. But yeah, and same with PT. Like I've worked with extremely high level PTs, and they are just incredible. Like their knowledge, their diagnostic, even just diagnostic ability, like depth of knowledge with different manual therapies, and then just their exercise and rehab knowledge. But again, like those are providers that didn't really get all that from school. That was kind of, they were already into fitness. They were strength and conditioning specialists. So, um, they were going above and beyond, but it was based on personal interest, and which was actually news to me. Like I didn't realize PT school, you didn't really come out of PT school with a lot of like exercise rehab, in your brain. Like I thought, oh, they must know like all the protocols and all the stuff. Like they get some basic like ACL rehab and some surgical stuff, but I was surprised to learn that they don't come out with that much knowledge in rehab. So, and definitely not as much manual therapy as. Yeah, I guess the gap between bare minimum educational requirements and standards. But yeah, there's PTs out there that they don't exercise, they don't really have a fitness background, and you're gonna have. I think the PT profession has many of the same problems that we have, just slightly different, tweaks of it. Um, but yeah, like emerging, I think, who knows, maybe 30, 40 years. But PT is definitely pushing Chiro out of the market. So, from a just purely almost business slash um, strategic perception or perspective, like Chiro has to do something because that's what's happening. That's it's just the universities, they have way more resources. The PTs have all the connections with the hospital systems, and it's something that Chiro, which is cool, like seeing Pitt open. I thought that was really cool, and hopefully a sign of someone, an organization pulling the profession into that direction. So having hospital access and just higher educational requirements. Just all those things have to come together, but it's going to take very long time to see. And then I just think more and more chiros that can get out there and show what they do, online, and show younger chiros as well, but also the general population. That I think that's all really beneficial. So again, yeah, I think we'll never be able to fully control like you know, our general public persona, but you know, the as long as we can still just provide high quality care, and you know, even people I don't agree with how they practice, I still think even at like the lower level or just average chiro is still doing a lot of really beneficial things, in their community, and just, treating patient population just based on our mindset, how we approach things. You know, I've, I've heard so many, we still have that core foundation of our profession that's, conservative. So trying to just lean people away a little bit from drugs, surgeries, short term, anti-inflammatories. I still think that's a huge benefit that we provide, no matter if I agree with certain chiropractors and the way they explain things or do it in their practice, they're still like the big picture perspective is still pulling patients in more that direction, which I think is very, very useful.
I find it interesting that our profession, we kind of celebrate being conservative musculoskeletal specialists, conservative care. But within our scope of practice, the bulk of the profession immediately jumps to the least conservative option that we have, which is joint manipulation.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So on the upper end of like the least conservative care that a physician has, what you could say is surgery, injections, medication, and we will bash them for jumping to the least conservative option at their disposal. And then when we get people in our door and you look at our least conservative option is joint manipulation, and we automatically jump to that as well. It's somewhat hypocritical, I feel, because we could
Mm-hmm.
do exercise, we could do more soft tissue, we could do lifestyle changes, things
Mm-hmm.
like that. And I think a lot of that has to do with insurance reimbursements, unfortunately, insurance company.
Yeah. Yeah.
But also, I think if the insurance companies right now flip the script and they said, we're going to pay you well for doing the least conservative stuff you have. Let's talk about exercise and lifestyle changes.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's probably a large portion of our profession who wouldn't know what to do with that time. If you said you can have an hour with patients and we'll pay you for it. I think some people
Yeah.
have been practicing in a way where anything beyond 10 to 15 minutes, that's all that they have in their playbook.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's too bad. I think that's
It is.
maybe a
Yeah.
missed opportunity to hone those skills, to spend time with someone and actually have the ability to provide that kind of value. But I'm curious because so when someone meets you and they don't know you and they're like, "Oh, what do you do?
Mm-hmm.
What's your what's your elevator pitch?" Do you immediately just say you're a chiropractor and then you just take whatever conception of chiropractic that they have, or how do you explain how you practice or what you do or what you are?
Yeah. I usually just say I'm a chiropractor, and then I welcome whatever questions they have, and then if they're interested, usually you get like it's either like 50-50, like they love, oh, I go to a chiro, I love chiro, um, or the opposite, like never been, don't know anything about it, or they just watch. They're like, oh, I love watching videos like online, people getting cracked. So um, I think with other medical professionals, I'll usually include something more like rehab or sports to chiro or um, yeah. I mean, health and like I would just say I'm in healthcare sometimes if I don't feel like explaining or talking. um, I've heard other chiros say like other more rehab and you know I guess more of what you are doing. They'll just say they're a coach, strength coach or something. So, um,
Interesting.
but again, like everyone's gonna have their opinion on that. But I'm fine just telling people I'm a chiro and usually welcome, educating them more on if they ask more questions about it. And but I usually explain more of like, because again, like general public doesn't have any concept of these things, so you have to use really basic terms. But like sometimes just say I do a lot of like muscle. I'll do some muscle work. I do exercise. I do um, some. I've said before, like I'm very similar to a PT. Like I'll do rehab and stuff like that. So just these basic terms that most people at least have a concept of. Um, but yeah, I guess it's who I'm talking to. But Yeah, I mean, my current approach now is I still use I do use manual therapy to a decent amount, but I've kind of evolved just the way I treat, and it starts from that minimally invasive, or minimally, you know, um it's all minimally invasive, I guess, in a way, but just more conservative, basic stretching, soft tissue stuff, um, and then basic exercises, and yeah, like I'll still adjust people, and I still do a lot of different manual therapies. Um, I know, like I'm very well aware of that whole debate, and I've had my own like dissonance in that as well, but I still find them very useful. And that's kind of, I guess, the mindset I have now is I'm kind of like utilitarian in a way. Like if it's useful and it gets results, like if it drives outcomes that we're looking for, I almost don't really care anymore about scientific explanations, or, you know, if it's supported or not. If it helps me with that goal, then that's kind of what I care about. So I've become a little more utilitarian in that way. But again, yeah, I was stuck in jobs where all I could do was adjust. I had 5 minutes with patients, and they also were coming there to get adjusted because that's what that office did. Um, so yeah, I've kind of worked in that environment, and I will say, like, I won't say there's zero benefit, to that kind of treatment. It's definitely not zero, but it's definitely not anywhere near what someone like what you're doing can provide. Um, so yeah, it's rehab, PT, all those terms kind of use.
So
But
then you're more goal oriented then, not therapy
yes,
oriented.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, again, I think I just listened to Dr. Liebenson on Chiropractic the other day. Like, it's an old episode, but I thought it was a great episode. And he kind of a little way he kind of criticized like the evidence-based people in a way, because he's like, you guys also lost like the whole idea, which is to get people, like, you're kind of too busy arguing about all this stuff, and especially around the manual therapies, and you're losing the big picture, which is the goal of getting true patient-centered, right? Patient-centered cares. We're getting lost in the doctor's beliefs and what they think is right, and losing that patient-centered piece. So that's really where I'm at, more so the last year, and just how my mind's kind of evolved. But I've always been that way. Like, if it's just results, results focus. If um, it's helping do that in a safe, efficient way, um, I really think that's kind of the core of evidence-based care. And yeah, we don't like looking, obviously we all want to know why things work. What are the reasons? But you can ask that question all day long, like over and over, even about exercise. Like, why is this working? I don't know. Why is this you know, weird adjustment to this one position in this exercise? Why does it work? So I don't know. But again, the overarching goal is, I think, if we can, even if we have different philosophies or different treatment systems, we have to agree on that overarching goal of, you know, subjective and objective improvement, feeling and functioning better, um, and doing so safely and efficiently. And I think that's really the core focus.
Do you think the narrative affects the patient? So
Oh yeah.
you might have someone who does more rehab and is more goal focused, and then you
Hmm.
might have someone who adjusts every patient and that's all they do. If you ask them both, they're both going to say the same thing. They're both going to say that they're evidence based which technically they are. They're both going to say that
Mm-hmm.
they're working towards goals and they want outcomes. But they're both going to have a very different explanation justifying what they do.
Mm-hmm.
And that explanation is going to have an effect on the way that person perceives their pain or their injury, and ultimately is going to have an effect on the way they seek health care in the future. So it's going to have
Mm-hmm.
financial implications. It's going to have long-term health implications. For example, this is an observation, but chiropractors who rely heavily on adjustments tend to tell people to rest more than chiropractors and PTs who focus on therapeutic
Mm-hmm.
exercise. So someone might go into a stereotypical traditional chiropractor and have joint pain and be told to rest. And if that rest, if they stick with that chiropractor for a long period of time and rest becomes the norm, in order to treat something like a disc problem, we're actually increasing the risk for heart disease and diabetes and cancer and Alzheimer's and dementia, you know? So
Mm-hmm.
that's where that's what really gets me. I don't mind places like the joint that just crack backs in and out real quick. What bothers me is the narrative and the explanation used to justify it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not even picking on the joint because actually think the joint is probably one of the more honest back cracking businesses, because I believe every interaction that I've had with the joint, they've been, or people work there, they're very upfront that they're not trying to necessarily make people healthier. It's just about making them feel a little bit better.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of times there's not a narrative attached to it. They're in and out. It's more treated like
Mm-hmm.
a nice massage, like a massage envy type thing.
Mm-hmm.
But what I have a problem with is the back cracking community, the subluxation based community, the more traditional chiropractic care that only focuses on manual therapy, which is not, when you look in the recommendations for a lot of these conditions, is something that you could do. It's not necessarily something that you have to do. So they're taking a very small sliver of an optional option and they're
Mm-hmm.
getting rid of everything else. And they're making that their whole specialty. And then they're attaching a narrative to it that ultimately, a lot of times, decreases physical activity and makes people dependent on routine
Mm-hmm.
joint manipulation. And which I think leads to disability, because then they start to feel like they need that chiropractor to feel normal.
Mm-hmm.
So the actual practice of joint manipulation and chiropractic adjustments, I have no problem with. I use them from time to time. But I have a real problem with the narrative. And I think that, to me, that's the biggest issue. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that's why these discussions really matter. And I think it's why it's important for people like you to be able to have a voice and talk about these kinds of things, because
Yeah.
you, like many of us, have gone down that path and come to these crossroads and ultimately had to make these decisions. And I think it's important for patients in your area to know that you've grappled with these things, and that, because how is someone in your area really to know the right provider for them?
Yeah.
Because they're just
Yeah.
looking at a website or social media, so they're only seeing what you want them to see. It's like the branding on a bag of chips or something. You know what I mean? It doesn't tell you a whole lot
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
everything that went into that. And I feel like that's the problem. One of the big problems that we have in our profession, and I'm sure it happens in other professions. That's why I'm curious when people talk to you,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe even the first visit. So someone comes to see you and they haven't really made a decision yet if they want to continue with care. What do you think it is about your message and your narrative that attracts people to stay and say, this is my guy. I trust this person.
Mm-hmm. Ooh. Yeah. That's a good one. I think um there's so many. I think there's so many unconscious, subconscious communication too that happens. That's almost more important than yeah. I my narrative, like I don't really speak that much or try to convince them of anything. Like I don't really. I explain what I'm doing and I explain the treatment. I don't give like crazy explanations or like, oh, this should do this or this might help. I say that might help with something like that, but I don't put like shoulds or coulds, and I don't really explain, yeah, like I don't go in depth into that aspect as much. It's almost like because I don't want to put like expectation effects into their head in a way. Again, like because I'm almost like trying to operate from like that outcome based like objective way. Like I want to know if what I do with them works without me getting in the way of that with what I tell them. Does that make sense?
It does.
So, because I'm aware of like how much that stuff can affect people's expectation, but also like the expectation people come in with. So it's usually like me more so like trying to absolve any pre-existing concerns or expectations that the patient has to get those out of the way. Like things that could maybe be like a negative nocebo almost on just the interaction, just prior beliefs, pain, fear avoidance beliefs, pain beliefs, um, but not really adding much back in, like of my own beliefs or what I think they should. I'm just like, yeah, let's try this and see if it works. And if it doesn't, we'll try something else. If that exercise doesn't work, we'll try this. If you know, the soft tissue doesn't work, we can try a different manual to get temporary relief. But yeah, I don't go into these long sales pitches, they sound like to people when I hear other chiros do subluxation sales pitch and other it really sounds like a sales pitch and it drives me nuts. It really bothers me when people use those kind of tactics to sell a certain treatment approach. So I'm just honest, like even I think rehab people do that too. I think there's a huge issue now with that, like selling obviously it's part of the business. Like you do have to sell these expensive plans to people if you're one of these cash based providers, and there's a little salesmanship that comes in. But I've heard like that bothers me too, because that comes with its own problems of again like that salesmanship and just giving the patients some narratives. So um I don't really think I don't really do any of that. I just result just results. Like if the patient feels better, we had a good interaction. They had a good experience with the movement. Again, that's an idea from Dr. Liebenson. Like you're giving them a positive experience with movement, showing them that their pain can be changed, and that oh crap, like I couldn't bend over when I came in here, and now I'm not afraid to do like a hip hinge and walking out of here feeling confident. So I just let the results speak for themselves. I don't try to. I make a conscious effort not to like be salesy, but that's just my personality, I think too.
Well, it sounds like there's humility there, and I'm sure your patients pick up on that because I think that's a strength, being able to say, I don't know, or this
Mm-hmm.
might not work. And I
Yeah.
expect a certain amount of failure, but that just gets us
Yeah.
closer to what you want to achieve because we're just focusing on your outcomes. We're not focusing on my tools. And I think
Mm-hmm.
to your point, whether it's a chiropractor who only adjusts people or a chiropractor who only focuses on rehab, if you try and make everyone fit your model of care,
Mm-hmm.
it's hard to be wrong then. And it sounds like you are open to not getting it right,
Mm-hmm.
but just to keep working on it. Do you think that maybe that you
Yeah.
convey that to people that there's almost like
Uh,
a lack of projecting on them, and where
Probably. Yeah, probably.
you're just there for them to listen to them and help them.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd have to ask I'd have to speak with ask my patient that, but one of my patients, but um, yeah, I don't know if that comes through, but I say I don't know all the time. I think I do now. I'm gonna step back and because I remember making one of my Instagram posts. I remember there was this point in there where I think it was the one I did on evidence based practice, and that I made like this caveat, kind of this like you do at some level need to convey some sense of certainty and like you know what you're talking about and like some rapport building phase, but I think you can do that with that honesty and like if you don't know you don't know. I think that also should convey that same idea, but there is like I think initially with new patients especially like you do need to convey that, okay, I know what's going on or I have an idea, even if I don't know obviously 100% or super certain that it's this injury or this issue. um conveying that conveying some sense of certainty in a way. I think that's where the less evidence-based providers have an advantage over us. Is yeah, it might be BS, but they sound very self-assured and they convey. And patients want, the number one question is like, why am I hurting and what is it? And they want a doctor to be like, that's it. Like it's this thing. So if you're not able to do that in a way that's still nuanced and honest, at least from my perspective, then um, I think I'm able to kind of walk that line a little bit. But you can also like confidently communicate that you don't know something. There's a vibe to it. There's a I don't know, but we're definitely gonna find out. Or we're gonna figure this out together. So you can still be you can still communicate that confidence and certainty, but do so with the honesty of like, I don't really know exactly what's happening or what's going to help the most, but we can figure it out together. Um, and I can't say where I learned that, honestly. I think I don't know, I've read so many psychology books and like human behavior and motivation's always been a huge thing that I've studied. So I think I've absorbed some of that stuff over time from learning that stuff. But yeah, I'm trying again, like establish that rapport. And with my other patients, I almost in like a joking way sometimes like I have no idea why that hurts or like why that thing helped and that didn't. Or like even if I'm doing manual stuff and just little tricks here and there to just help someone's discomfort. If someone, hey, I don't want to take Advil on my knee. I did something to my knee this weekend and I can barely bend it. I just don't want to take Advil all week. Like, okay, let's slap some tape on there and and it's gonna help. They'll ask me what is a tape, Jim? I don't know, but it like it helps. It might help. So we'll see how it feels. Um, so I think there's an honest way to go about it and still, again, like you're not trying to explain too much to the patient. They don't really care, honestly, about the evidence or mechanisms. Like they want something that feels better. Um, in terms of like manual therapy stuff. And then yeah, even just with exercise stuff, like some of the exercises are, you know, they look weird or they want to know why does this help with their pain, and it's like I don't know. Like it just changes something. So we'll see if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't.
Hmm. Do you like it sounds like you like the freedom of it to me. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
in previous practices where you could only really practice one way. You had to adjust everybody.
Mm-hmm.
You had to say certain things or at least not be completely
Yeah.
upfront. If it sounds like maybe you felt a little bit more restricted and now stepping out of that. the freedom to say, I don't know, but we can figure it out. Let's try this. Let's work on this. Is that kind of sum up how you feel about it?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great take for sure. And yeah, that was that when you're a covering doctor or you're working and taking over or working in a practice that has the patients are used to a different doctor. It's like you're very limited in what you can say. I don't want to mess with their system, and I don't want to, if the patient believes they're out or subluxated, and I just wasn't gonna mess with it. I'm not gonna mess with it. Just going through the whole process of like changing the patient's beliefs system, and um again, I kind of just let my approach speak for itself, and if the patients do better with my treatment, then that's really really what I cared about when I was limited in that way. So, but yeah, definitely now it's the ability, especially I love when you get a patient that's never been to a chiropractor. It's like the best. That's my favorite. But even with every, yeah, just again, like I don't think there's going like down the whole like pain science rabbit hole with patients. Like I think there's utility, but it's limited in terms of like how much you do it. And yeah, I think that's something I heard from like Greg Lehman, who's a huge pain science uh educator. And I remember listening to an interview, he kind of was upset about like becoming known as the pain science guy. Um but even he said like, yeah, that it's doing it solely by itself and focusing so much on the education aspect and the pain science, and it didn't seem to help past a certain point with patients. So again, and then you're putting other explanations into their head that you know it just makes things more confusing. So I think again, I go back to my utilitarian approach. Like if it works, it doesn't, or if it works, it works. If it doesn't, we can do something else, and try to leave all the cognitive mental stuff as far out of it as we can.
How does your current work environment allow you to do that? What's changed?
Just I guess, similar mindset in the office, multidisciplinary. So it allows me to do what I do well, and like diagnostics and stuff, evaluation, and kind of management plan creation, but still being able to send the patient down the hall to do rehab and other modalities and stuff. So it's not just me trying to do everything. And the patients, it allows also the patient to have, you know, an hour or more of treatment, and not just getting one type of treatment, each day. So they can come in, and I'm able to, again, like see them work with whatever we want to work on and go over anything that we have to go over. And then my time is freed up to, like, I can send them again down the hall so they can do the other stuff. And I don't have to worry about trying to do everything in a way. And I still, I feel good about the treatment that they're getting quality wise. But the model as a business also works really well. It's not super challenging in terms of my time being limited to where I can't see enough people in a day um, to make it work as a business, but also seeing a good amount of patients, but them still getting a quality care. Because I think there's always that quantity quality dynamic at play. No matter what your business model is, I think that's just reality of healthcare being a, profit driven business and in our society. So as individual business owner, then you're always kind of keeping those two tensions, those two things in tension, and um, finding a good balance for me personally, and based on my beliefs and value system that I'm comfortable with. So I'm really happy to find something that fits that as well. Um, and yeah, just being able to provide high quality care in that environment. So the multidisciplinary is, I think, really big for me, finding that. Um, and then, yeah, just I think finding another chiro that's like minded. We kind of sports medicine based, and all those things that were something that I was missing from previous positions. So,
What disciplines do you guys have?
we usually have we have the chiros, kind of we're kind of the first person everyone's going to see in the office. So, um, and we're also responsible kind of for point of care, managing the patient, even if they're not going to come in for chiropractic. Um, I'm still a big part of that management plan and creating that and whatever I think is going to be best for them. So, um, we have OT and PT, and then that's going to be mostly a lot of most of the patient's time is going to be spent with them. Um, and then we have massage therapy sometimes, and then we have some acupuncture as well, a couple of days a week. Um, so just kind of a broad scope, a lot of different options for patients.
Out of all those options, what's usually the most popular? Do people come in and
Patients
say
love massage.
they love the massage? Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, yeah, everyone likes the manual therapies. Like, I'm not gonna lie, that's just the truth. Like patients love manual therapy. Um, the the acupuncture, um, that's a big patient favorite as well. But yeah, I mean, in terms of how I practice and I think the chiro, it's not that quick crack, crack and you're out, like real in and out kind of quick like that. So I think the patients are really happy with, my approach that I take. So, um, yeah, I can't, I mean, I don't really know. I'm sure it's so much different from practice to practice, but the, patients very happy with how everything's going. So, again, I took over a position. So you're always worried about losing patients and based on what they were used to and their attachment relationship with the previous doctor. So that's a huge kind of hurdle that you have to go over in the beginning. But it's been going really well. Patients are doing really well. So
Good. How did you end up finding this new position or this new opportunity?
it came through. It was someone that we kind of were talking, years prior, just after kind of the pandemic stuff and me when I was looking at different opportunities, years ago. So um, we kind of talked, once or twice, and then timing. It was always like a timing issue. It didn't work out just with my other positions, and um, but the more we talked over the years and saw how similar goals and interests that it just kind of came together this year, just kind of out of the blue. So I was looking at some of different options. I was looking at going back to maybe do some teaching in school, going back to California, um, and then some other family stuff that was going on. So I was kind of bouncing around all over the place. But yeah, timing worked out. So very happy.
Oh, good. Yeah, I'm happy that it worked out for you. Um, I know that when we had originally connected, you were at a point that I had been at previously, where one
Mm-hmm.
option was to just stop practicing. And you know, I've regardless of what you had chosen, I think that would have been good for you. But I am happy that you were able to stick with it and
Mm-hmm.
find something, a way to practice in an environment that allows you to do what you want to do. Because
Mm-hmm.
I think I can relate. It's just this weight's lifted off your shoulders when you can just be honest
Yeah.
with patients and just try
Mm-hmm.
and help, and you're not tied to anything, any specific narrative or modality
Mm-hmm.
or method of care. You just can focus on someone's goals, and
Yeah.
you feel like you're very you can be very honest with them. And I think, I don't know, even
Yeah.
your tone of voice, I remember when we first talked, it was there's like a sense of distress to it. I don't know what I'm going to
Yeah.
do. And I, like I said, I've been there, and it's almost hard to give someone advice because I
Mm-hmm.
don't want, you got to kind of find that path on your own. And
Yeah.
it makes me happy that
Yeah.
you found it.
Yeah. I mean, I really obviously very grateful for people whenever you reach out for advice, but I think, yeah, I've kind of come to learn that um it's almost impossible to give advice to someone else. And it's like you probably shouldn't really take advice too much from others, or you should be really skeptical of the advice that you get. Because, like, again, no one knows the context of your life and what you really want. So I think it's good to bounce around ideas, but you really got to figure it out on your own. And sometimes, yeah, but a lot of people just have to walk that path. If I was talking to a younger Cairo right now, I'm like, you kind of just got to go through it, like kind of walk the journey on your own, and you'll figure it out. But stay true to like your values, and for me, like integrity, honesty, those are always so important. And you just that sense that you're not practicing in that way just eats away at you over time. So um, yeah, just I guess again too, like I think it was in, the year 2, 3 years out of school. It's everyone goes through a period of, um, again, like those ideals kind of like sloughing off of what you thought the world was like, and you know what business would be like, and so I think that's a universal experience, for a lot of Kairos, but or just almost any job, um, and yeah, just kind of facing that and then figuring out where you're gonna go from there. But I mean, yeah, now I've reached a point where there's still a lot of uncertainty, and kind of just accepting that as part of the process of, I think, in the long run, like becoming a true expert or master in your field is just that constant feeling that you're not, constant feeling that you have more to learn and that you're always progressing. And it's an uncomfortable feeling, which is why a lot of people settle into like these really rigid belief systems and systems and practices. And um, I just want to stay open and just learn from my experience. And yeah, I'm really interested to see kind of where the top dogs in the profession take us, whoever those people are. I hope some of the sports diplomates that were my mentors can be a part of that, steering the profession. And um, you know, at least from our school, the people I was exposed to, um, I think they have a great perspective of like what we can provide. And um, at the high level, I don't know the ins and outs of the uh, the board and the committee and what they talk about in these meetings, but I'm pretty sure it'd be really interesting to hear like what they their conversations that they have, and their beliefs about the profession and where it should head. But I'm sure it's very similar. Similar conversations happening, but
now with Pitt involved,
yeah.
And I think,
I think it's awesome.
Anyone listening is Pittsburgh. They have this program. They've had it for a while. The primary spine practitioner, PSP. It's for PTs and chiros, where you can go. And from a practice standpoint, I believe it's largely McKinsey based, but they have. It's not a McKinsey seminar, so it's a lot of hands off. And to the best of my knowledge, because I had applied to it one time, I just didn't have time to end up going. That it's teaching you how to evaluate people to see, are they actually good candidates for surgery or higher intervention, or is this something that can be handled conservatively? So it was the idea of bringing PTs and chiros onto the same page and then creating this subspecialty where a physician or a patient could know, oh, I'm going to a primary spine practitioner. This is going to be evidence-based. And I believe that the program is run through their actual med school or under that umbrella. So it's quite evidence-based. Mm-hmm. And then recently they started our own chiropractic school. I think this was actually the first year for them. Maybe it's the second year. And this is groundbreaking because it's the first time we've had a chiropractic school in an actual major university system. So we've always been outside, and that's actually been something historically that I think the chiropractic profession has been proud of to a certain extent, that we've been able to stay out of those systems for so long, where some of us are kind of now celebrating the fact that there's a strong voice from within one of those systems where you're actually integrating with medicine and with other professions, mm-hmm. and the education is largely dictated by those systems. So now and chiropractic controls our own board exams, which is an interesting thing, and I think also makes us quite unique. So in order to write board questions, all of the chiropractic schools have to submit questions. So you can't just have one school dominate, because if one school focuses more on rehab, for example, another school doesn't do a lot of rehab, you would have this. So they have to pick questions that represent the totality of the education system, which can be incredibly diverse. But now we're just throwing this wild card into the mix of someone or the school that is going to be very diverse. And I wonder what are those test questions going to look like? What are those conversations going to be like? Because they're probably not going to be sympathetic to subluxation theory, where I feel like at our school, the education was somewhat agnostic. It was just kind of like, this exists. You should know about it. You need to know about it for boards. We have some people who believe in it. We have some people who don't. Just do you. We're just going to try and give you mm-hmm. a good, well-rounded education. But that is not how a lot of other chiropractic schools are run, that are very much more philosophy-based. And now you have this school, which I think is probably not going to be agnostic, that they're going to be very open about, no, these things, mm-hmm. we don't have a good amount of evidence to support these, and it's been over 130 years, and I don't know, I don't want to put words into that system's, that Pitt's mouth for that program, because I didn't go through it. But I'm very interested to see that influence and how it starts to shift things, because I think if you look at like the American Chiropractic Association's website, they don't mention subluxation on it. I've looked for it, other than maybe in old articles, like old blogs or something like that. Like it's not in their recommendations. It's not, they I don't know when they made that shift, but they're not outwardly saying these things don't exist, but they're also not promoting it. So for me, that is mm-hmm. that is somewhat of an acknowledgement mm-hmm. that they realize that they are recognizing that there's not a lot of robust evidence to support this, and it's been a certain amount of time. We should have evidence for it, and if we don't, we should pivot. We can keep doing what we do, but we got to stop explaining it a certain way. So very excited to see, because this new experiment of this new school will inevitably shift the way board exams are. And if the board exams shift, education has to shift to adjust for that. And as education shifts, to your point, the ripple effects are ideally producing, higher quality healthcare providers. And I think a lot of chiropractors would just completely disagree with what I just said. It's going to get worse because it's going to be less quote unquote chiropractic. But I think so. It depending on how you feel about it, you're probably going to have a very diverse opinion on it. I'm just interested to sit back and see what happens. And I don't think it's going to be a radical change quickly, but I do think that it is a huge step in the right direction. It makes me very optimistic about the future of the profession that we've taken this step. I don't know. I'm excited. I'd be curious to see back on campus at SCU the thoughts about it and the thoughts within all of the other schools, how they're, is this a celebration? Are people excited? Are people skeptical? Are people upset? I don't know the answer to that because I haven't talked to anyone about it. I don't know if you've communicated with anyone.
I haven't talked in depth with too many other chiros from other schools programs, but I mean, even within my cohort, like there was a lot of us practice kind of the same way. I don't know, we all kind of were pretty like-minded, and I think especially in the sports medicine program. So, but that's just my experience. So I can't speak from someone else's, but from what I've heard, like some of the other schools it's wildly different. And like, so I don't know when you come out of that, how you think or even how you perceive these kind of conversations, like if that's all you've been exposed to, or just if you don't have, again, just have that open-mindedness. But I don't know, there's some level of it, like it's never, like when there's some level of even like that rift between Western conventional medicine and just the whole like alternative medical or whatever you want to call it. There's so many factors at play there with those two. Like there's fundamental worldview differences that I don't think you can kind of like align no matter how much you debate. Like if you disagree on like first principle level of things, like you just from there you can't really go anywhere. So it's just kind of agree to disagree. But I think that's kind of behind the riff in the profession too, and it kind of permeates, again, like all the medical conspiracy stuff and like all these other beliefs that stem out of that side of things. So again, like I urge people, if you think that way, to look at like the outcomes of those beliefs in the long run, and what the profession's gonna, what that's gonna turn into in reality for the profession is continuing to want to be fringe and outside of the status quo, and that's gonna harm the profession in the long run, and just not being able to integrate with these other professions, So even if you think more in that realm of things, or that's what you believe in, like it's still the outcomes of that are not going to be great, for the profession. So I think I think SCU actually just started a PT program this year, which is interesting. So that's going to be really, really interesting to see. But I think, more of the schools doing that. I think National's pretty multidisciplinary as well. They have PA programs, and so I think, those out of those places I'm aware of, I think it's going in a really positive direction. And again, like you said, some chiros are going to say that's the wrong negative direction. So I don't. But if we don't, then PT is just going to keep pushing us out, and it's just going to get more fringe and more contrarian, and just that's just the way I see it.
Well, I think a big problem is that if ever someone makes a definitive statement and says, and outside of our profession, and says, look, the chiropractic subluxation, this whole model that chiropractic historically has been built on, it's not real. And if insurance companies start to say that, well, there's a very large portion of the profession that can't practice. Even in Michigan, our
Like
state law says, our
Medicare.
state law says that we correct subluxations. I think it actually has the term subluxation in there. So, it's just not. It's almost like we desperately need to update the way we talk about ourselves and the way we talk about it. It doesn't matter what other people are saying. We need to in-house come together and say, look, we value the diversity of care. It doesn't have to look identical, but there needs to be some standard of care. And I think that's what's lacking right now, is that if you said, well, I'm going to go see a chiropractor, what kind of standard of care am I going to get? I have no clue. I honestly don't know. They could, rub crystals on your feet. That could happen, and the explanations are going to be out there and different. We just don't have. I think we need a basic standard that everybody, either you agree, and if you don't agree with it, you're just not part of the profession. But within those basic guidelines, as long as you're operating within there, then you have all of the diversity that you want. So if you want to be more of a manual therapist, you potentially could do that. And if you didn't want to do a specific type of manual therapy, but you wanted to do dry needling, you could do that. And if you had a specific type of rehab that you liked better than a different type, you could do that. So that I would want to keep as much diversity as possible, but also I would just like some standardization. If you have a kid and they get a viral infection, you feel confident you could send them to a physician and they're going to handle that. And I just feel like there are a lot of professions like that where there is a standardized way for the most part that people within that profession will approach something. And I just think within chiropractic right now, it is because we've celebrated being on the fringes so much. We have this huge, wide diversity. It's almost too much where you can't, like if someone says, should I go see a chiropractor? I don't know what that means. I don't know. I have no idea what that standard of care is going to look like because it could literally be anything.
It's chaos.
Yeah.
It's chaos.
And that's a hard thing because it's like to be within a profession and say, well, should I go see someone within your profession for something that your profession specializes in? And for me to not have confidence in making that recommendation, I think if the profession can just go in a direction where I start to have confidence that I can just in general recommend chiropractic care, I would love that. I would love. We don't ever have to get there, but I would. I feel like we are going in that direction to a certain extent with certain things that are happening, especially with the school opening up in Pitt and more providers and more schools like SCU and National. Just at least being agnostic and not saying that this philosophy is truth, and just saying it's just philosophy. You read it and make your own decision. But I think we still need more. I think we need more standardization. I think we need better guidelines.
Yeah.
And within those guidelines, you have the freedom to operate. But outside of those guidelines, you're not within the standard of care anymore. So at least patients would know then, oh, there is a standard. This is something that I know that a specific quality of care that I'm going to get or I should get. Yeah. And I don't think we have that. And I think that's frustrating.
The standardization is so important because it's like you're only as good as you're almost only as good as like your worst member, or like like the average has to be reliable enough to where, like, again, you can recommend someone. And I think that's what medical did so well going back to the early 1900s when they kind of did that massive reform was um, improve the standardization of education. Again, it has to start with the schools. So, um, and PT did the same, PT did the same thing. So it's like, even if you don't know them personally or seen the PT office, like you have a reasonable expectation that they're going to get average care. It's just, obviously you want to find in your local area the best of the best for every doctor, because everyone knows horrible MD, horrible PT, horrible DC. Like, there's always going to be variation, but when that variation is so wide and it's almost like the curve, like the U curve is just like almost flat. It's like, it's really hard to recommend people. So, but yeah, again, it has to come from the schools. Like, it has to come kind of bottom up when kids are first learning everything, and coming up from there, and eventually, and then those chiros will grow up and practice, and then bring up the next generation. So it has to start from that base education system. So um
Yeah.
and yeah, I don't know, it's like, again, any radical, this is kind of like that tension between tradition and progress, is like, progress is going to take some pain, like some change, and it might hurt the profession in the short term. It's going to hurt schools if they have to close. Like, there's things that are, if you make a radical change or reform, then it's going to have consequences that you have to be willing to pay. And that might mean the profession suffers for a little while. So there's always that consideration. But yeah, medical school did it. They did it a long time ago. It was radical for them. I think they shut down, what was it, like 70% of the medical schools in the country. But back then, everything was so kind of new and, young and disorganized. So it was they had more agility, I guess, flexibility to make those changes. But yeah, like now you have these institutions, they've been around for quite a while. And um, yeah, I don't know how they would go about it, but I do think it's going in the right direction. And the stuff like Parker is doing down in Texas, and Palmer, and just the research unit that they have is doing a lot of work, so a lot of funding. So I think it's, yeah, positive.
Yeah, I think there's some fundamental things. If I can nitpick on Palmer, Palmer has a robust online continuing education forum, and it's really user friendly. I do it for CE credit, but they have some great courses, but they also they have a lot of courses that really contradict. Some stuff that is, hey, here's what the evidence says, here's what the guidelines say, and then they've got other stuff basically saying the opposite. And I took a course from Heidi Havoc. I don't know if I'm saying that. Harvick, I think, is the way they pronounce it. Anyway, for people who don't know, she's a chiropractor, I think, from New Zealand, who's also a PhD, and she's I would say probably like one of the leading researchers in the chiropractic profession. And I think she does a lot of stuff with Palmer, but she has her own research institute out of New Zealand, I believe. I could be wrong about that. Anyway, she does a lot of work, and I think a lot of times when I talk to chiropractors who don't agree with me, they reference her work. But I get the feeling a lot of times they haven't read the whole paper, because I have subsequently read a bunch of her papers, and I think they're all very positive but very honest when you read the discussion and the conclusion.
Mm.
And so I think a lot of people within the profession who are very pro traditional chiropractic will quote Heidi Havoc out of context and not realize that, within the discussion and the conclusion, she's saying, this is not enough. We need more. We haven't proven anything yet. I've just never seen one of her papers where there's the smoking gun. And when I took one of her courses on I think it was on low back pain, but I found it frustrating in a way because there is obviously Palmer as an institution blessed that. They said this is good content. So ideally they would have listened to everything she said. And one of the things, and I can't quote her directly, but she said that within her research, they are working hard to show proof for what we do. And, you know, I wish she could, I wonder if she wishes she could take that back or they would take that down, because from a research standpoint, you're never trying to prove, like, you can't come in with a bias to do good quality research. You're trying to test something and you're going to see what happens. So if you're automatically going into research trying to prove a narrative or justify something that you've been doing for a long period of time, I don't know how much I can trust that information. But even with that bias, they haven't been able to prove anything. So how long are we going to wait? You know, how long are we going to entertain the Bigfoot, enthusiasts out there? We don't have anything but grainy photos and eyewitness accounts. Sasquatch probably isn't real. Loch Ness Monster probably isn't real. Traditional chiropractic has been saying the same thing for 130 years, and we don't have anything really that's significant. So at what point are we just going to stop trying to prove this narrative? And it doesn't mean we have to stop adjusting people. We can still keep doing those things, but why don't we just change the narrative and start working more towards what you're talking about? Like, let's just work on outcomes and drop this. And a lot of people listening, if you're just a chiropractic patient, you're like, why does it even matter? And I don't know the answer to that either. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe I should just stop caring. I don't know. It just it bothers me. It bothers me when someone says, yeah, I've been seeing another chiropractor, and I say, well, what is it like when you go see this person? And they say, oh, well, so and so said it's so good you came in when you did, because this is shifted out of place, and we've got to correct the misalignment and things like that. And it's like, it's just not true. We don't have any evidence to support these explanations. And we actually have a mountain of evidence would suggest that it's not true. And if something has spontaneously shifted out of place in your spine, and we really think that, it's an emergency. It's an unstable spine. We got to spine board you, and you need a neurosurgeon quickly. The things just like they do happen, but it's almost when they do happen, they're out of our scope. It's trauma or pathology.
Yeah.
They need an oncologist more than they need a chiropractor. And I think giving people these explanations, I've worked at a place that had scripts where we actually used cancer as an analogy. If you let this spine pain go long enough, just like someone who doesn't get their cancer treated early enough, this is going to spiral and it's going to become something that is very hard to treat. And that was literally a part of a script that was written. That's fear mongering. And there are a lot of practices out there that actually came from a practice management system. And I can't really give more information than that because I signed a bunch of stuff. But there's a lot of this is a big practice management system. There are a lot of chiropractors out there around the country. And so if you're listening to this and you say, oh, my chiropractor said that, I don't know. If you're happy with the care, I guess stick around, but I have a problem with it. I have a problem with the American Chiropractic Association not putting their foot down on some of this stuff. I have a problem with schools inviting these practice management companies onto their campuses to sell this stuff to impressionable, budding doctors. And I have a problem in general with this false level of certainty in a theory that was created by someone in the late 1800s, and
Okay.
like they didn't know. I'm not trying to go back in time and say that, oh, look at these dumb people creating this. They didn't know. They were doing what they could do. They were thinking outside the box and they were trying to provide something better. So good on them. Let's do the same thing right now. Let's think outside the box and let's
Yeah.
critically evaluate this, and let's put our foot down and say some of this stuff, some of these explanations are not neutral. They're harmful. And they don't
Yeah.
represent the profession well. They make us look silly. I don't know.
Hmm.
I guess
I
I
think
don't
the
know.
same
I'm
way.
not I'm
Like,
not on the pain science side of it, but because I see what you're saying, that can be its own belief system in a way. But
it's
I
like
want I want to be honest.
there's a little bit, yeah, definitely honest. The sometimes sometimes I think there's a little um I mean, I think these are problems like every the medical profession has. Like these are common problems in so many. For me, I my earliest, I think what I went most in depth with in terms of understanding like research and just how kind of teasing apart all these problems in was in nutrition and like that dynamic they have in that world, and also the challenge of doing research um in nutrition. But I think musculoskeletal research faces a lot of the same issues where um you're dealing with the human um body and mind, and it's like the degree of complexity, the how do you even formulate these studies? Like it doesn't really align with the scientific method as easily as like, you know, medication or prescription pharmaceuticals do. Like it's a lot easier for them to do clinical trials and get like a high level of evidence. With musculoskeletal stuff, it's so much more complicated. Just in not on the both the treatment side, but also like on the diagnosis side, like how you including what's the inclusion criteria for patients, like non-specific low back pain. It's like, okay, what does that mean? And the neck pain and like the studies. So if you're setting up studies with all these variables that are so, it's impossible to eliminate variables like you can in other fields of study. So I think there's an inherent part of the types of research that we can do. And like, even if we get the best research, is going to be like the power of the studies is going to be small. The effect sizes are going to be small. So um, the the level of certainty that we can take from the research is also going to be a little bit lower than other fields. And I think that's just a musculoskeletal medicine issue, like broadly. Um, and also the same, that core problem of just people trying to solve like this complex issue of pain and injury, um, that's been obviously something that we've been trying to do for a very long time. And these early theories back then were probably cutting edge, and the evolution and still like we're just, yeah, it's like this unending quest for why do I have pain? Why does my back hurt? Um, and
Yeah.
it's still something that we can't really answer a lot of times, which is frustrating. Sometimes I'm like, maybe I should have just been a mechanic. Like everything's like, it's like, why is my car broke? Oh, well, this is broken. Like this doesn't work right.
Yeah.
Okay,
It doesn't
simple.
matter. It doesn't matter if
I think
your car can't
that's
be depressed.
yeah. I think that's honestly, I think that's the draw of a lot of the technique systems is like, people just want to see the body in that way, like this mechanical,
Hmm.
even in PT world, like the whole ideas between people moving wrong or incorrectly and having these like systems so where you can treat the body as this very simple mechanical thing that if you just know where to push or where to poke or where to move things that it's going to fix, whatever their problem is. And I think that's a really enticing thing that a lot of chiros and PTs and doctors get really attracted to, is that like you want to be able to do something that can seemingly fix a problem for someone, and then I think part of that frustration when you get years and years of experience is that you can't, and it's a lot more complicated than that. So, and then you maybe look for other systems and, keep learning. But yeah, that's the unending pursuit that we're kind of all following, is this, musculoskeletal conditions and what's the true cause and what causes pain. And it's, yeah, it's just something that we'll always kind of have to, battle with and keep learning. So, but again, me personally, my approach is, it's like you can't address musculoskeletal stuff without just general health promotion and I think that's part of the evidence-based side too, is like biopsychosocial and incorporating all these different aspects into patient care that even if we don't know like what our hands-on treatments or rehab is necessarily doing, like at the very least we can at least educate the patient and make them healthier, for the long run, give them some basic health empowerment. So that's like just the overarching goal that I operate under.
Well, I think that's a good way to leave it. I think that's a perfect summary. So, Corey,
Nice.
Thanks for hopping on today, and I really enjoyed this episode.
It was a blast.